an every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. He's a Kentucky born, Nashville rising rock and roll artist, none other than Mr. Lee Isaac.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Lee on Upside and can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Well, my name is Lee Isaacs. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. I'm currently an artist living in Nashville, Tennessee. I make music, mostly rock and roll. I kind of blended a lot of my style a little bit with country and folk and um, even a little bluegrass and some other stuff mixed in there. But I love to tell stories. I love to write a lot. I think music is the best way to get across some of those stories that you want to tell. Somewhat because you're able to do it in just a few songs, but I'm a big fan of art in all different ways, and I'm happy to be here.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Mr. Lee,
Thank you.
thank you. And and today let's talk about albums versus singles. So
Mhm.
tell us from artistic standpoint, when does the idea feel like it needs to be an album versus standing alone as a single?
Um, in today's day and age, it's actually a little bit easier to make a single versus an album, not because of the actual recording process, but singles tend to do better in today's world. I think a lot of it has to do with people's attention span. Uh, People they see a single come out maybe by their favorite artist, or even if it's somebody that they don't know, and it's someone they're getting introduced to for the first time. It's almost easier for them to just grab onto that one song and listen to that for what it is, rather than say there's a whole album that could be 12 songs long and it's going to take over an hour to listen to. When I first started out a few years ago releasing my own music, I was very much in favor of an album. I used to actually write songs almost meant for albums, meaning I would write uh, a song and then maybe come back and have another song that I thought, wow, that would flow really well with the song I previously wrote. And say if I was in a certain headspace for a few months at a time where I was writing songs that had a similar theme or they had a similar style, I'd almost think, well, these belong together on an album. It makes more sense to release them all at the same time. They kind of tell a story that is fluid and flows between maybe not each song sounds the same, but one can roll into the other with ease. And as a result, a lot of the stuff that I used to write in the first couple of years that I was putting music out was more based on how can I put this all together and make it one long story and make it one album. And I used to want to try to get my work out in an album format. Mostly because I think albums tell a great story. I think that they really hammer home a certain idea. You have certain styles like the rock opera, say, for example, which was very popular back in the day in the 60s and 70s, and it's still popular somewhat today. I mean, you have one of the more famous albums of the 21st century, American Idiot by Green Day, is a rock opera. It tells a story from start to finish. And if you were to listen to Holiday and Boulevard of Broken Dreams and all those songs, you're going to get a similar feel and a story within the songs themselves that connects all together. And at the end, you kind of feel like you've gone uh, almost on a journey as if you were watching a film. The music is able to get you into that mood where you notice there's chapters and that it follows sort of a linear time plot. I prefer albums in the sense that I'm a little old schooled. I like the idea of putting on a vinyl record onto the record player, listening to a whole side, and then flipping it over and listening to the second side. Uh, Especially, I mean, I feel like for anybody, if you have an artist that you enjoy listening to and you like their work, when they release a full length album, and full length can be anywhere from 11 or 12 songs to sometimes artists put out double albums and triple albums even of songs up to 30 plus. It just depends on what your mood is. And if you really like an artist, you'll listen to a lot of their work. You see people like Taylor Swift, who has an immense following, one of the most popular artists, not just in the world right now, but of all time, that if she puts out an album of, say, 28 songs, some people might think, well, that's a little long, but her fans are going to enjoy every single track. They're going to thoroughly listen to every single song on the album. And it's a whole experience for them, which is what albums are in a sense. They are an experience. They can produce songs that have maybe that hit quality that people tend to pay attention to one or two or however many on it that they go, wow, I like to play this one more than maybe the other seven plus or whatever. But I think that an album overall, it has a similar feel throughout. And I used to write like that. I used to think, well, I'm going through something, excuse me, I'm going through a period of my life where I've been writing a lot about, say, this event that happened to me or the overall feel of what's been going on in the world at the time. And it makes sense to put all these songs that I've written in the last 2 or 3 months together and have them released collectively. So that's not always the case nowadays. People tend to like singles for, as I've said, the singular, quite literally, feel of it. Sometimes they like one song that really speaks to them, or one song that they feel is playing. They're able to play it again and again. It's a repeatable song, and they can replay it a lot. Uh, the album, it's funny. About 15 plus years ago, whatever, Elton John wrote a nice piece for Rolling Stone of all things, Elton John writing for Rolling Stone, not one of their own writers. Elton John said that the album will survive because people like to listen to songs collectively as a whole. And I think that's true. But people tend today to, especially the younger generations that like to listen to music, they like one off songs, they like singles. I think singles do attract attention. If you wanted to release a song that you really wanted the public to pay attention to, you would release it as a single, which is why a lot of artists say if they release an album of 12 to 15, whatever many songs, they'll put the song that they think will do well commercially out as a single, or a few songs that they think would do well individually out, and hopefully the commercial audience will listen to that or those songs individually. uh, it's a fascinating thing in that singles, they really do drive the business in a sense. They really do get people into them. And I do like one-off songs, but it's funny because I've had to really change a lot of my writing standpoint. I used to write based on albums. I used to say, well, I've got some songs that I've been writing in this headspace, in this particular uh, mindset that I've had, and I want to put them all out collectively. In the last couple of years, I would say I've gotten to a point where I start to think more in terms of singles. I go into the studio a lot of times wanting to record one track that I then focus on how well can I make this individual song. And then when I'm done with that, I might want to go on to the next song and think, okay, now let's focus all our attention on this. I used to record in the sense of I've got 3 or 4 songs, let's start with this, let's lay the guitar tracks down, let's lay the drums down, let's lay all the bottom layers, stack it up, and say, "Hey, guys," if I had musicians playing on the records besides myself, I would say, "Hey, let's try to knock out as many of the rhythm tracks or whatever for today that we can on the songs that we're focusing on or the songs that I brought in." And now I tend to go in the studio and I think one project at a time, that project being this individual song, this song that's going to be released as a single that I think would do well. In the last year, in 2025, for example, I released Some Truth was a single, uh, Burning the Candle was a single, and Take Me Back to Lexington was a single. All did pretty well, but I was much more single focused, if you would, rather than say I'm focusing on an album. Right now, for 2026, I've had a few people that say, well, what are you going to do? I've got a lot of songs that I'd like to record, a lot in the bank or stockpiled away or whatever, as you want to put it, that I am much more focused on now in the sense of, well, let's get this one done. Let's see. if I want to make any changes to it later on, if I really want to go back and remix it or add anything in, and then once we've got this individual project done, let's focus on the next song. And then I feel like at this point, it's like, hey, if I've got enough songs recorded and I like the way that they flow, I like the feel that they have overall to them, and I want to put them out on a collective album, then I'll do that. Uh, Sometimes it can be tricky. It can be like, well, you go in, you might have a few songs that you say, well, I think these belong together. I think they should be released together. I think that they tell a story that's similar enough through each song that they flow together and they should be released as a collective unit. But ultimately, I think for right now, most artists that you'll see out there, they focus on individual tracks. That's why you'll see, I mean, the Grammys were last night. A lot of the artists that were nominated or that won awards or whatever, they were awarded for their individual efforts, meaning one song at a time. Obviously, Album of the Year is still a prestigious award that people want to know who won. So I think the album does survive. I think it does go on, but a lot of the focus in more of today's society goes on individual tracks. I think that comes from people's shorter attention span nowadays. Everybody wants to maybe be hooked for a few minutes rather than say an hour plus, which is why you find people more interested in say TV shows, a single episode at a time, than a collective movie that might be 3 hours long. So it can be tricky today as an artist. You're trying to figure out, well, is it better to release an album or a year's worth of singles that you put off, you put out a month or 2 at a time? So it can be tricky, but I do think singles are more popular today, but I do think the album will survive. Are you there, Daniel?
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Mr. Lee. So, in the age of streaming and short form content, our album is increasingly archaic format, or is it there a renewed cultural hunger for the deep, cohesive experience they offer?
I think albums do offer a cohesive experience. I think that there is a much deeper meaning if you say like a track off an album, for example, that speaks to you, that might be good enough to make you want to listen to more songs off the album. Sometimes artists do a great job of relaying to their audiences that they have a stronger theme or a similar thing that goes through all of the songs on their album, and they try to put out a collective work that says, "Hey, I just went through this breakup. I just went through this life-changing experience. I just went through something that I'm trying to document or make a statement on." And sometimes one song isn't enough, even if it's 5, 7 minutes, whatever. Sometimes an album is much better for the explanation of the experience they went through or what they're trying to relate to their viewers or listeners. And so I think in a deeper sense, it would make sense to put out an album that would be a little bit more detailed and explaining what the artist is trying to relay in terms of a story. I think a singular song can tell an individual story just as strongly as it could 70 years ago. It's a powerful thing, but I do think that typically, if you're going to tell a story that is more in depth, that is full of more characters, and it's got a rich value of trying to explain to the listener or the viewer that there's more going on than just this one chapter, then it would make sense to put out an album. A single song can only tell so much. Even if it's 10 plus minutes long, you're only telling one story. Maybe you can try and tell multiple stories, but it might get lost within the context of how complex the song might be. I think if you want to tell a story from start to finish with multiple chapters, with multiple uh, vantage points, with a lot of detail, it would make more sense to put out a collection of songs that would be an album. And ultimately, I think that's why the album is still popular. I think that's why people still flock to when their favorite artists release something. When Sabrina Carpenter puts out Short and Sweet or Man's Best Friend or uh, The Weeknd or Taylor Swift, anybody, when they release something that is collective and says, "Hey, I just went through this. This has been the last 5 months of my life." It makes more sense to put out an album that would help explain that to their listeners and show them that there is more than just maybe this one little chapter that maybe only a single could do is explain one chapter or one segment of what's going on. The album I think is probably the best fluid way to express whatever it is you're trying to relay to your fans and to your audience. Singles are popular, of course, because people love that one-off sense. If you have a song that maybe is a little more exciting, gets people on their feet, something that people find catchy and they can play over and over and over again. Yeah, you would put that song out as a single, but if you put it onto an album where the album may be talking about something that is going on currently in your life that might relate to people, it might inspire them to go, well, I like this one song, but a lot of what it's saying, if it's on an album of songs, might be relayed in another message on another song elsewhere on the album. So, uh, the album overall, I think, is still a great artistical way to go about things. I think that you can relay a lot more messages to your audience that way.
Very well said, Mr. Lee. Very well said indeed. How does the pressure of streaming and analytics, where the track skip can impact promotion, fundamentally change how you sequence an album or even decide to make one?
Well, that's a good question too, because there's been times where artists in the past, and the best example I can think of off the top of my head right now is when Guns N' Roses in 1991 they put out "Use Your Illusion." Now, that was a concept that they said, well, there's "Use Your Illusion 1" and then there's "Use Your Illusion 2." They put out two albums instead of one because they felt, well, it probably would be best to explain this side of things and that side of things. Overall, artists tend to want to relay more. That's why a lot of their songs tell a much deeper sense of whatever it is they're trying to tell their audience. Songs in general, it's easy to get your point across with one song. It is. If you do it correctly, you do it right, and a lot of artists do it well. You can get people on board with what you're trying to say. Bruce Springsteen, for example, he just put out a song called "Streets of Minneapolis" about what's been going on there with ICE and everything. And in a sense, he felt, hey, this one song is enough to relay what I feel on the situation. Some artists might feel, well, that one song might not be good enough. I might need a whole album or maybe an EP with 4 or 5 songs to relay the message they want to put out. So it really can just depend on what the artist is trying to relate to their fans. It can depend on the subject matter. There's a lot of factors that go into it. I think that a good song sometimes can be enough, but sometimes situations are more complex. Sometimes people tend to maybe want more. If you put out a good song that says your viewpoint on the situation, your opinion, on whatever the situation is. Sometimes that is enough, and sometimes for your viewers, that's enough. I know that it's easier for, especially for artists that are much more unknown, artists that are up and coming, that maybe don't have the kind of following that some of the major stars do. It's easier for them to put out one song at a time that their fans can look forward to, or they can promote to people and show to people and say, "Hey, look, I only need your attention for this small 4-minute interval amount of time." So sometimes that's enough. I do think that if you really are a true fan of someone's work, then listening to more than one song, listening to an album's worth of songs, maybe that is the best way to really get to know an artist. Maybe that's the best way to really understand and appreciate their music. And that's why I think the album will continue to go on. I think that fans, they might be intrigued enough from the first song that they heard by an artist that might have been a one-off single, but then when they find out, as is the case with many artists, that that single actually appears on an album and that there's more songs similar to the song that they first heard, or they like the artist enough that they feel, well, if I tried this one song out first and I saw or heard for that matter that this artist was good, they were intriguing, I like their work, I want to know more about them and more about their style. It's easy to go to that album and say, wow, there's more here than maybe I initially thought, or more, there's more to discover, so to speak, than what they initially discovered. So uh, I do think that fans of good music and fans of people that put out good music, they're going to want more. And that's where artists get into the idea of, okay, I'm not just going to put one single out for the year. So, for example, I'm going to put out several singles. That sometimes can translate into an album, that can translate into a bigger collection of songs. I think that people, when they tend to find somebody they like, they want to explore more of their work. And so, if you're an up and coming artist, say, for example, you might start off releasing a couple singles or a few singles in the first few months to a year that you put stuff out. But eventually, if you have a good enough following, you're starting to gain traction, you're going to want to put out more of a collective unit. And I think an album is a great way to do that.
It's an album indeed. And Mr. Lee, is the core difference simply that an album tells us a story over time, while a single captures a singular moment or feeling, which is more powerful?
Well, it can. A single can capture a singular moment. It can capture one individual instance or one feeling or story, particularly that gets people's attention. Versus an album may go into a larger narrative, not even just because of that literal sense, but because there's more to be said on the subject matter at the time, or there's more that people want to hear about. An artist might put out a song that sounds good, and when I say for commercial use, I mean something that can be replayed a lot, something that's catchy, something that people would tend to put on and play for their friends and say, "Hey, listen to this new song by this person that I've been listening to," and that's a great starting point. But again, if somebody is intrigued enough with an artist that they've heard, say for the first time, they're going to want to explore more of their music. And I think that the single game, in a sense, like I've said, for younger or more up and coming artists, is a great way to start. I think for any artist, whether even if they're the biggest star on the earth, they're going to put out singles till the end of time that their fans can get into. But eventually, diehard fans or people that really pay attention to an artist's music are going to want more. And that's where I think an album eventually is in store. Now, some artists do this in the sense of saying, well, I've put out, say, 7 or 8 singles in the last year or two. Maybe I should put out a collective album, and they'll put those 7 or 8 singles on an album with a few other tracks that they think maybe wouldn't have performed as well commercially. They wouldn't have done maybe so well on their own, but if they're put on this collection of songs that have already done well, then people might pay attention to these 3 or 4 tracks that weren't released individually. People tend to like that. They tend to like the idea of, hey, there's more than we were being told. There's more than what we were given. Uh, I've noticed artists and bands over the last several years that I might have liked a few of their songs, and then I find out, wow, not only are these songs on this record they released, but there's a lot more to be said. There's a lot more songs on this album that they had just put out that does include some songs I know, but there's more to be heard. There's more to be explored, and I think that artists tend to like that. They like the idea of giving their fans more than they already know, not just in the sense of releasing new material, but in the sense of, hey, this song that you might have liked, that might have had a certain niche or style, actually is similar enough to a song that you've never heard before and it's never been released. And that song that they're talking about that's never been released might not have gotten the same kind of traction. It might not have gotten the same kind of following or exposure that another single would have done on its own. Songs like these tend to be slower. They tend to be maybe a little more intimate. People, when they listen to a single, say for example, you're not going to put out a single that's a 5 minute song that's typically slower. It's a little more intimate. It might be sad. It might be a little more. Uh, detailed in its explanation of a difficult situation going on. For example, if you released a single that was talking about, this great time you're about to have with this great person and whatnot, that would typically tend to do better from a more uplifting, positive standpoint than a song that might be a little bit more, for lack of a better word, depressing or get people a little bit more in their feels. It might do better if you release the happier track, for say, uh, than the more sad or emotional song. But if you were to put it all collectively on a album or even an EP that uh, goes from one song to another, where hey, there are good times, but then there's also bad times, and I'm going to relay that in this collective unit. Uh, People will want to hear that. They'll listen to it and go, "Well, I like this song. I like the way he explained the story or the way he goes about it. Here, let me see what this other song is." I think an album is a great way to showcase how good of a writer you are, how good of an artist you are, and what kind of overall variety and depth you have as a songwriter, an artist, as a musician, whatever it is, because it shows more than just one side that you have. Uh, and I think a lot of artists, they understand that. And eventually it does reach a point where you notice releasing one song at a time, even if you're doing it every month, it may not get your whole point across. Sometimes you do need to release an album's worth to show people, hey, not only is this the kind of variety I can give you as an artist, but it also shows this is the kind of depth I have in my style, in my unique sense of music, and it gives people an opportunity to explore more of what you can bring to the table.
Very well said, Mr. Isaac. But before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my Abstract Essay is already in sixth season, Abstract Poetry in third season, and my book 101 review in sixth season as well. Jock Comedy 101 in third season, and Food 101 in sixth season too. Geography 101 Love Letters, Movie 101 Review, Music 101 in fifth season, Science 101, Sex 101 in its fourth season, Trivia 101, Law 101, Mental Health 101, Motivation 101, Entrepreneurship 101, and of course, my Bible Verses 101 are my baby podcasts. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Lee, I'm inviting you to please do come over on Music 101 and let's talk about your music itself. So, are there a reason examples of an album capturing a defining a cultural moment in a way that string of a single simply could not?
It's a great question. And the best example I can think of personally, my favorite album ever is Abbey Road by the Beatles. Might be a little cliche. The Beatles are the artists that originally got me into music. They're the reason that I ever picked up a guitar and felt I want to do this myself. And if you listen to Abbey Road, there's many songs on it, especially towards the beginning, like Here Comes the Sun, Come Together, Something, a lot of those earlier songs on the album that could have, and some were released as singles that did really well. But when you listen, say, excuse me, to the second half, it's more of a medley. Each song flows into the next one, and people tend to feel like some of those songs, if they had been released as singles individually, they might not have grabbed people's attention as well, and they might not have felt uh, as fluid maybe as they did listening to one song after another on the album. I think that in some senses people make albums to relay an overall sense of the story that they're trying to tell. Sometimes it's easier to break up a story into certain chapters, into certain points where it makes more sense to say, hey, uh, you might get this one idea or this one feeling from, say, one song, but it would make more sense if I could explain it with multiple timestamps here. There's many great examples of that, like "Dark Side of the Moon" by Pink Floyd, as I mentioned, "American Idiot" earlier by Green Day. Uh, those are albums that the songs individually might have, and many of them did do well on their own, some of those songs, but it makes more sense almost if you listen to them fluidly. Holiday, for example, was a big hit for Green Day, but it flows right into Boulevard of Broken Dreams, which was another great song on that album. And sometimes you can get a different feeling listening to those two songs together, which is what you do in the sense of an album, rather than just listen to them individually. So I think that it's a great way for artists to showcase not only their depth but also the story they're trying to relay.
Mr. Lee, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your projects, or anything you want to promote on Abstract Essay?
Well, thank you, Daniel. I appreciate the time. Uh, love chatting with you. And yes, of course, if you're not familiar with my music, you can look me up anywhere: Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon. I'm everywhere. Pandora, YouTube, all over the place. My name is Lee Isaacs, and I make music for the people. And I hope that my music can help you along in one way or another.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Lee Isaacs because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering music will rise. So, Mr. Lee, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it.
Welcome, people. See you soon.
Well,